when you ask them to meditate on a question and you get two different responses from the voice, which one do you listen to? You listen to the voice that's not affected by greed or hatred or delusion. Or, most people's minds are, always wavering or hesitating, or they have doubts. And so it can't make a decision, so it might give an answer, two different answers, because, it doesn't have that clarity to give a definitive answer. So there's still confusion in the mind. Of course, that's not going to be overcome easily. That takes years, for most people, years and years of meditating until the mind learns to differentiate between various thoughts or opinions that are going through the mind. And don't always believe what you think, because usually your answers are going to be conditioned and based on other things. Like if you question your emotions, why is this emotion arising? So on one hand, if your mind is dominated by the ego, you say, well, I have the right to be angry. The person insulted me. Or the next moment, well, maybe it's just a habit. And so maybe both answers are right. So you have to kind of keep observing and keep on whittling it down. And maybe you'll never come to an absolute answer, unless you understand that it's just awareness. Because all the different dualities of right and wrong, good, bad, these are also just conditioned opinions in the mind based on experience. Now, some of them have reality. In the Dhamma context, whatever we would call bad, that means something that leads to pain for oneself, others, or both. And what is good leads to less pain or happiness for oneself, others, or both. So that's a kind of a mirror, called the mirror of Dhamma. Whatever you intend to do, the Buddha gave these instructions actually to his son named Rahula. He gave his son his instructions. Whatever you're about to do, before doing it, you should examine it. Is what I'm about to do, whether it's a body action, a speech, or even a thought, is this going to be something that's going to be conflictive or painful for myself, others, or both? And if you see it is, don't do it. And then, if while doing it, if you slip up and you didn't examine it before you started doing it, while you're doing it, if you understand that what you're doing is going to bring pain for yourself, others, or both, cut it off. Don't keep going on that. But if you happen to go through the whole thing and before you were aware and only at the end you ask, what I just did, is that going to bring pain for myself, others, or both? And if you see it going to be yes, determine there and then not to repeat it. But if you determine that whatever you're about to do, let's say you're about to help a little old lady across the street or carry the heavy groceries, what I'm about to do, is that going to bring happiness for myself, others, or both? Then do it. If the time is right, if the conditions are right, you make it, okay, do that. So, and if at the end you found out that what you did brings you happiness to yourself, others, or both, repeat it. Make a habit of it. That's the practice of Dhamma. And that's the way that we gradually decrease the weight of the past negative vibrations and karma and increase the weight of the good memories and the effects of the better actions. And in the end, we can go beyond good and bad. Even you can give up deliberately wanting to do good. But in the beginning, we need to combat the effects of the negative actions by doing more wholesome qualities, which means practicing friendliness, generosity, developing wisdom, all the normal sort of good qualities. And giving up, stinginess and miserliness and anger and hatred and ego, and pride and haughtiness and all these kind of things, which only bring negative vibrations around. So that should be the criterion, actually. What advice do you have for people in recovery from drugs and alcohol? Of course, we don't have to limit it to drugs and alcohol. Recovery from any other kind of addictions too. Whether it's, there's so many negative addictions in the world. Well, we have to replace it with something else. And why do people get addicted to anything, especially drugs and alcohol? They do it to kind of get away from their problems, right? Or they get it to get high. Back in the 60s, right? The hippies, took drugs, or they still do it now, to get high. Why do they want to get high? Because they're not high. So in meditation, there's something missing. There's empty holes in themselves. So in meditation, you gradually learn to fill those empty holes with vibrations of aliveness. Like feeling the blood pulsing in your veins and arteries, feel the little sensations. Let in the world rather than pushing out the world. From a meditative point of view, from the state of awareness. And then you'll become naturally high. Because the mind isn't grasping after high or low. Even the idea of high and low are just is a division of the mind. But the mind that's not needing anything, that's resting in the present moment, that is a natural high. So, of course, somebody who's in the grips of addictions may not be able to meditate very easily because of that strength, but done in conjunction and to follow other standard protocols and so on, like even going to AAA or what they call other things. There's Drugs Anonymous and all these kind of things, and they employ different spiritual teachings to it, and all of those are useful. But meditation can enhance that. But again, it's not easy. It's not even easy to meditate for a person that doesn't have those kind of addictions. But everyone's addicted, to various things. They're just different types. Could be addicted to the ego, So that's also an addiction. It's like a drug. So But the advice would be you have to have a lot of patience, and the more, all the various types of support you can get by going to groups, whatever you feel helps you to keep from going down or back to the old ways. We need all the help we can get, but not being overly dependent on others, knowing that even though whatever the lowest depths you might have gotten to, understand that below that there's the Buddha. That means there's the pure mind. There's awareness. And that's what we have to have the faith about. That it's there, no matter how deep or dark you might get stuck in your mind. It's just a temporary mind state. Underneath that, there's the light of the pure awareness. So anything we can do to help remind ourselves of that. Like pausing every time. That's why making these pauses. And what I tell people usually at the end of retreats, practice M&Ms. An M&M is a minute of mindfulness. It's a practice to pause during the day every hour for 1 minute. Stop what you're doing. Let go of that rush to the future and just bring your attention to feel your feet on the ground or feel your buttocks on a seat. If you're standing, the best time to do it is actually when you're standing. And practice a minute of standing awareness. Just, feel the feet on the floor, the hands at the side, the clothing touching the skin. Ah, yes, standing. And whatever else your mind is doing, that's something else. But just, touch base with the present moment vibration, and all your other dharmic knowledge or insights will kind of become recrystallized in that moment. And you can tell yourself, don't rush. That lady in front of me with 20 packages, send her metta, don't get angry about her. Or you're standing in the checkout line, instead of looking around, or looking over the People's magazines to find out, Michael Jackson reborn. Just, keep your feet on the ground. Take a couple of deep, slow breaths. Taking deep, slow breath is wonderful. It's really a cure-all. If you ever want a cure-all in the world, it would take a pause and take a deep, slow breath. Hold the breath in the lungs several seconds. Slowly breathe out. Do that a few times. And whatever you might have been caught up in before that, it would have vanished. So, anyway, that's just some advice. But I think, doing stuff like yoga also is very good for people in that kind of recovering from addictions, because, getting grounded and getting a good feeling in the body, stretching the muscles and joints and feel more alive. That's why people get addicted. They don't feel alive. So they need these addictions to make them feel alive. Any particular tips for those with trauma and have increased anxiety with the breath? And that's kind of strange to me how somebody can have anxiety with the breath. I mean, the breath is life. It's life. Unless one had been strangled or something in a past life and had some issues with that. But otherwise, but it's true, the deep breathing opens oneself up. And if you've had trauma and fear of the world, if you've been abused or whatever else, then of course, that might have severely impacted the cells of the lungs and the memory and so on. But still, with, I think, a regular and steady practice of developing breathing, it can be done. And because actually in all my studies in yoga, in India. I lived in ashram in India for 6 months even before I became a monk. It was one of the most valuable, apart from the meditation practice, that learning how to do deep, slow breathing was revolutionary. But you have to start out slow. Most people have a contracted lungs, and because of emotional states and bad postures, that's why we can't breathe very deeply, because we're always kind of hunched over and contracted, and so that prevents the rib cage and the lungs from, expanding. And then because of that, there's the fear of death. You're not getting enough air into the lungs. So anyway, you start out, and counting is a good way to train yourself. So even if you have a loud ticking clock or something, you sit by that, or a metronome or something. In the beginning, just try a 2-second breath. Just try to for 2 seconds, like breathe in. And pause, even just for, let's say, a half a second. Or not even at all in the beginning. And then take 2 seconds to breathe out. And just kind of pushing the expansion of the lungs, just a wee bit, little by little, And then after you can do that for 5 minutes without feeling fatigued or so, boost it up to like 3 seconds or 4 seconds for one in-breath. And holding the breath a little bit longer. And then once you're able to do that for 5 minutes without feeling tired, boost it up a little more to a 4-second breath or a 6-second breath. And holding the breath in, like if you take 4 seconds to breathe in, hold the air in the lungs 2 seconds. And you take 2 seconds to breathe out, and you pause, or you take 4 seconds to breathe out and you pause for 2 seconds. I mean, most people should be able to do what's called a 4:2 ratio fairly easily. It's not really that difficult. But again, some people may have difficulty. Because see, the normal rate of breathing is about 15 times a minute, even in rest. That's what most of the books say, right? And if you can cut that down to just, let's say 6 breaths a minute, that would be a radical change. And taking 6 breaths a minute is not really that difficult. In the yoga ashram, I used to practice where I could get down to just 1.5 breaths in a minute and continue that for 10 minutes. And you're in a very deep state of samadhi just by doing that alone, not even concentrating on something else. Because it changes the whole blood chemistry of the whole body-brain chemistry when you're doing that. But of course, it takes a long time to do that. But I'm saying, so you just gradually increment the amount of time from a 4:6 ratio, or 4:2 to a 6:3 to an 8:4 to a 10:5 and a 12:6. 12:6 is fantastic. That means you take 12 seconds to breathe in, hold the breath in the lungs for 6 seconds. You take 12 seconds to breathe out and pause for 4 to 6 seconds before breathing in again. How many seconds is that total? 24, 6, 30. You're down to 1.5 breaths a minute. Just doing that. But again, it takes a long time. It took me about a year to build up to that level, practicing every day for quite a long time. But you can, whenever you're thinking about it, you're sitting around, you're riding on the bus, you're waiting there in your car at a red light, just take a couple of deep, slow breaths, just practice. Even that is almost a 5 or 6 second in-breath. That's not much. And holding it in for a few seconds. So beautiful. You can't think when you're holding in the breath. It's like getting hit with a ball-peen hammer, It's so powerful of a sensation, you can't really think And when you let out the breath, it's a very relaxing sensation. And you pause for a second or two to feel that stillness. And gradually, you keep, doing that over and over. But it's like anything else. The more you practice, easier it becomes, and the longer you can do it. And so, even when you're sitting around at your house, even if you're watching TV, just try to sit straight, and just do some deep breathing, even while you're talking to somebody. Or there's so many times you can do that, and it all is very beneficial. Some Vipassana meditation walking uses individual lanes. What is the difference in philosophy, outcome, benefits? I mean, individual lanes, and it's just so, person doesn't walk off a cliff or something. In the traditional monasteries in like Thailand and Sri Lanka and Burma, every monk's kuti has an individual walking lane because they're living alone out in the forest in different places, so they have walking lanes. And it's also so you can keep it clear, so scorpions and snakes can be seen easily, and you keep it swept, so it's got nice sand on it. And they just walk from one end to the other, and then they stop and stand. And then they slowly turn around, and then they walk back to the other end, and they do that, as long as they like. And usually there's a bench at the end, and then they sit down, and they sit for an hour. And whenever it gets too painful or they get sleepy, they stand up and they start walking again, back and forth. But in groups, like, when you're doing it in groups in centers where there aren't these individual lanes, or where you're you have to have a lot of discipline to do that, because doing it on your own is the mind will make up all kinds of tricks why it should change something or do something different or walk faster, or there's no one watching them. So that's why group practice is good for people whose discipline is not very good. So so whether you're doing it in a group, you get a more intense practice when you're kind of going around in a circle, because you have to walk slowly because the person in front of you, right? So, but you also need to learn to do it by yourself too. So whenever you're walking in your own house, just like, whenever you stand up from having finished doing something, before rushing off, first just stand up straight, take a deep, slow breath. There's a don't rush. And then just do, even if it's just 5 or 6 steps, lifting, swinging, touching, pressing, shifting, to walk from the sofa to the sink, or from your bedroom to the living room, or whatever. All of these little short periods also add up, to the mind seems to think we need to zone out. Is there any true spiritual benefit to going unconscious? Depends on what you mean by unconscious. There can be different levels of going unconscious. Just being lost in your daydreams is basically being unconscious. because you're not conscious and alert to the present moment of what you're doing, basically. No, there's not too much spiritual benefit or meditational benefit in doing that. Although it may feel good. And it may feel like you're kind of meditating, but again, it's just a dead end, people going around in circles. And making inference to behaviors like gulping your food, mindless states. And other things. That's just basically, most people are living in, a semi-unconscious state. That means they do things, but they're not really fully aware of what they're doing because they become habits. The body can even walk in its sleep, right? Sleepwalking. The body can be trained to do things. Cells have memory and so on. And so, but it's not much different than a zombie. So there's not the consciousness there. So there's not much likelihood of changing. And then there is the danger of, getting in an accident. You may luck out. Like the classic example, driving a car and then you daydream and you forget you were even driving, and 10 seconds later wake up and, oh my God, I wasn't even conscious for 10 or 15 seconds. You could have gotten killed. You just lucked out that you didn't run off the road and something. So that's why, mindfulness, most of the time we do things unmindfully. That means, there's a difference between kind of mindfulness and just ordinary awareness. Like, okay, I could do something like, take a drink of water, it's very quickly kind of put it back. But I would miss at least 1,000 moments of true present moment awareness by doing that. I might be generally aware that I just took a drink of water, but not really in the present moment, because my mind was in the future. It had an idea, I want to finish this so I can do something else. So that's why people's minds are mostly in the future. Of course, they do go to the past quite a lot, but primarily in their waking state. For most people, their days are so packed full of things that they do, right? That they never have enough time to do it all. And so they're always thinking about how quickly am I going to get through this? So they walk quickly, they get to some place, they're eating quickly, they're whatever they're doing, they're talking quickly. So, that's most of it is what we call unmindful in terms of, really doing things mindfully. So you're really aware of the hand lifting up and aware of that aversion to an itch and then, touching. But you're doing that in the present moment. So even though there is the idea of a future, doing something in the future, you're doing it in the present moment. You're doing it with present moment awareness. But there may be the object, okay, I'm going to go to that place, but while you're going, you're in the present moment. The mind isn't there and then you step in a manhole or step on a snake or bump into a tree because your mind wasn't present with what you're doing. So almost every single accident that happens is due to unmindfulness. You stub your toe, walking too fast, not paying attention when you're going, you stub your toe or bump into something or, whatever. And so only when you deliberately practice periods of mindfulness in these sort of, we'll call them sterilized conditions, but only then do you realize the difference between doing something in a relaxed, mindful, present moment awareness as opposed to a neurotic, future state. Yeah, that seems to be all the questions. We have maybe time for another one or two if somebody wants to raise their hand. Some ongoing question beyond that, or so. Yes.
I was wondering if you had any recommendations for finding a balance between trying to stay in the present moment as much as possible while also incorporating planning for the future skillfully as well as learning from the past. How do we hold all of those three in a balanced way together?
Well, it takes practice, but even while you're maybe planning something, learn to pause for some seconds or a minute in between. Let's say you're planning a wedding, for example. You got all these lists. Okay, after doing that for 10 or 15 minutes, when you find yourself getting a little flustered, I forgot it. Pause, stop. Do an M&M. Just stop what you're doing. Kind of sit up straight, take a deep, slow breath. Hold the breath in a few seconds. Then let the breath out. It's just like getting injected with a tranquilizer. It just calms you right down. And at least to calm down so you're not in that kind of hyper flustered state. And then go back again to doing what. But make it a habit to stop, to recognize when you're going too fast, you're starting to get flustered. That's the time you have to have the discipline to stop, pause. The world's going to wait. And take a couple of deep, slow breaths. Touch base with that present moment. Tell yourself to relax, slow down. And then, again, go back to what you were doing. So that's really the best way to balance that. But, initiating that habit of learning to pause, that's, it should be simple, and it is simple if people actually do it, but remembering to do it is what's hard. And if you can't even do that much, I'm sorry.
How do you see setting intention as fitting into mindfulness?
Setting intention?
Setting your intention of what you want to do. So if you say, I'm going to walk across this room. That is my intention, right? Not my goal, but my intention. How is that?
Okay, what is that intention based on? Is that intention going to be something that's good for you, others, or both? Or not for you, others, or both? Of course, you might not be able to answer that specifically, but learning to slow down and mindfully walk naturally is good for oneself and others, and both. But if you rush over there to somebody and then trip and fall and knock them down, then that's not good for you, others, or both. But anyway, so the intention, we have to be clear on what is the nature of this intention. Is it going to be a skillful intention, skillful something, or not? Like even to speak before you speak, especially if you're speaking with somebody where there could be tension or arguments that could easily come up. Be careful, What do I need to say right now? Is it really going to be necessary? Because you don't know how a person's going to explode or erupt. You might think you're speaking the most calm and helpful words, but you don't know how another person's going to take it, right? Your kids or anybody else. They could erupt. People are like volcanoes, waiting there to erupt at any time. So that's why the intention is to, before you're doing something, to pause and say, is this really going to be necessary at the moment? Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe there's a better time to confront your child about a certain particular thing or something else. And never do it out of anger, you know, or being frustrated. First, always take a couple deep, slow breaths. Again, that's the magic pill. If there's a magic pill, taking a deep, slow breath is the magic pill. And calm down. And then try to speak in a constructive way. But still, people may still take your things the wrong way. I mean, this is the nature of human interaction. That's why speaking less is better than speaking more. Because most people speak because they want to put their opinions ahead of others, or you know, whatever, show off their knowledge, or you know, and so on. But
what about gratitude meditation? Where does that fall into practice?
well, it's also an important part, because knowing that we don't exist alone. And we're dependent beings. I mean, you know, and no matter, even if you're living alone, you're still dependent on others. Somebody's making the food that you're buying or getting, or you know, the animal's giving you your life if you're out there hunting and killing some animal to eat. You know, we don't live alone in the world. Even though we may be alone, we're not independent totally. So to have gratitude with what you have. There's so many people that don't have anything, and especially if your life is fairly okay. Most people living in this country, you know, compared to half the world, I mean, their life is, even though they may think it's miserable, it's not nearly as miserable as probably half the world. And so to have gratitude with what we have, we take things for granted, right? Most people. They don't have that gratitude. So the gratitude helps to weaken the sense of I and ego as well. And so by, you know, thanking people for their help and repaying people's kindness, not just taking, but repaying it in some way, in some proportion to how you've been helped and so on. Like, you know, some stranger, you know, you're broken down on the road and somebody just stopped and, you know, helped you fix your car or gave you gas or whatever, and, you know, so to have gratitude and, you know, pay that back and don't just take, but to give. So, and forgiveness also. So forgiveness is a very important thing to incorporate. Whenever somebody crosses you or does something that you're resentful about, holding grudge, you got to let go of that quickly, because it's a poison, you know, and it festers inside of ourselves. So there and then, let's say, you know, during the day some colleague at work or somebody else does something that gives you a look or says something or whatever that you get a little bit resentful for, and you know, say some four-letter words beneath your breath or something like that, you know, stop and do an M&M instead of going on that and festering on it for a long time. Or stop and do an M&M. Take a couple of deep, slow breaths, and then just reflect on, okay, they said something. So what? Is it really going to kill me? Is it really hurting me in any way? Probably not. If it's just hurting your ego, maybe. Or maybe they are cheating you in some way, you know, whatever. You know, they didn't repay your loan, or they, you know, your tools, they didn't bring them back that you lent them. But you always have to ask, did I never do anything to anybody else? You know? And but anyway, to forgive others that may have done something, and forgive yourself also. If you did something unskillful, you made a mistake. We're always going to make some mistakes here and there, because we're not all perfect. So you've learned to forgive others and forgive yourself, and then send metta out for both yourself and others. So that's a good thing to do every night, actually, you know. So you don't keep those things inside. Somebody else had a question back there.
Just had a question. I was curious, you talked about by lengthening the breath, it changed the chemistry of the blood or something. I was a little curious about that. If you could say more.
Well, I mean, the whole body is nothing, and the brain is a chemical laboratory. I mean, it's producing so many different types of chemicals. And so, and breath influences that. The amount of oxygen that you're burning. Like if you're burning a fire in a place where there's not much oxygen, the flame's not going to be very bright and clear, right? But if there's plenty of oxygen around, it's going to, because oxygen is what burns things. So the more you breathe, our cells get fired by the oxygen. And if you're not breathing much, that's why people have tired blood. And they're feeling kind of half lethargic, because they're not really breathing fully and deeply enough. So their cells are half starved. So by learning to do deep, slow breathing and even holding the breath in longer, so you get enough time for the air that you breathe in to get all totally into the bloodstream. Normally people don't even hold their breath in, so they're just out, and a lot of the breath gets expelled without using the oxygen. So by learning to hold the air in a few seconds, and all that oxygen then gets used, and you're breathing out the carbon dioxide. So that changes anyway. The amount that you're breathing changes it's like an engine of a car. If you put dirty gasoline in there or something, then it's going to be a sluggish engine. But if you're putting in nice high octane gas, then the car's going to fire better, sound better, work better, and not wear out so quickly also. So anyway, that changing the what I call the blood-brain barrier, it has, it changes that. And especially in terms of tranquilizing the nervous system. Because if you're not breathing enough, the cells are, grasping and craving for oxygen. And that's what you feel as tension or restlessness or other things, on edge, stress. So if you do deep, slow breathing, almost instantly you calm down, because that affects the nervous system. Everything is based on the nervous system. And it works on the life force that's flowing through the nervous system. And that life force is also awareness too. And it rides in with the breathing. So that's why, doing deep breathing is really wonderful. And only now I've read recently articles by doctors are starting to tell people they should do deep, slow breathing. But, how many centuries has it taken? Or 50 or 100 years of doctors not even talking about it, And yoga. It's very interesting, you all have cell phones probably, right? Smartphones, even I have one. So, you get all these ads always coming on with the cell phone. And most of them are nonsense. But one of them, you probably have seen it, it shows somebody doing some yoga poses about for back pain. And it says, this is what chiropractors never want you to see. And it shows a yoga pose. It's an instant back relief. Because chiropractors, they get their money by, fixing people's backs, right? Now, if people are going to fix them themselves, they're not going to go to the chiropractors. So it's very interesting that there's 2 or 3 yoga poses. How many people have seen them on their cell phone? No? I'm in a special club? Maybe because they know I'm a yoga teacher. But anyway, maybe you might see one. But it's interesting how it comes up all the time. There's 3 specific yoga poses. They say if you do these every day, you'll never have back pain. And it's true. I've been doing them for 45 years, and I never had back pain. No, I shouldn't say that. Now I'm going to have back pain. And once in a while, if I'm mindful and I do a quick movement without being aware, I might strain or pull a muscle for a while, and it gets painful for a while. But that's, again, just a temporary state. But so, but really, if anything else, try working and practicing the 3-part breathing, because it's really. It really is a wonder drug, you might say, but it's a natural drug. But make sure you're breathing clean air, not in a polluted place.
I've even had experiences where I was breathing well, deeply and smoothly, and I'd hear a pop, pop, or a crack, crack in my body, almost like my body was adjusting, my upper back was adjusting.
They do that.
Just with the breathing.
Yeah, it does it.
Yes, fascinating.
Yeah, because when you take a deep breath, your rib cage and chest is expanding a couple of inches, and that's pushing all kind of things out of the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so naturally our joints and bones, even our spinal vertebrae, get easily displaced. Called right and left vertical displacement, and certain exercises, they pop them back together, And people might get alarmed. They think, oh, that it's going to hurt, but actually no. It's actually, for most part, it's a good thing, because they're sliding back into place. So there's quite a number of yoga exercises that do that. People might think they're overdoing it or doing something wrong, and it could be that they are, but sometimes it's just this, what I mentioned, the joints being popped back into place.
Bhante, I know we're getting close, but this might not be a good question to ask us, but the jhanas, the deeper states, can you speak not going into details at all, because I think most folks know a little bit about that, but in general, how do they relate to the vipassana in terms of, in terms of getting more deep perception? What's the relationship there?
I think most people have a wrong idea of what jhanas are. They think it's some absorbed state where you become oblivious of other things and you're just totally absorbed in some deep quiet, or filled with your mind with light, or some other thing like that. But the jhanas are defined as the 5 hindrances subsiding and the mind resting in one point. The one point is the present moment. It's not necessarily focused on an object. The one-pointedness means the mind has gone to one. That means it's gone to the present moment. It is not being distracted by anything that may be coming and going in and around or through it. To me, that's jhana. And there's different levels of that. Now, other people will argue, no, but each person can define things from their own experience. So you can reach that level of one-pointed through practicing mindfulness. You don't have to specifically stop mindfulness and just practice what somebody calls concentration. Now you can do that, and maybe you'll reach some state of jhana, but it's going to be qualitative different from the jhana you reach by practicing mindfulness, and the mind is no longer distracted by sleepiness and monkey mind and other distractions, and it comes to that point of being centered in the present moment in the body, a total the peace, and the mind becomes very bright and aware.
Which is more what the Buddha taught, right? The Buddha didn't teach one point awareness at all. I mean, as far as
Again, it's
the
this
notice,
one pointed, this idea of one
Yeah.
pointed. For
Like-
one person, one pointed might be, my mind is totally just,
Yeah.
one pointed on that watch. Or the way I prefer to describe it is the mind resting in the, you could call it the pointless point. Or in Zen, the gateless gate, right? But it's that the mind is resting in the present moment without any of the hindrances. And in that, there's that full vibration and awareness. But it's not being distracted by any of the hindrances. So I call that concentrated awareness. As opposed to just concentration or just awareness, concentrated awareness. And that's where the mind, by practicing the breathing awareness, you develop that jhana, means when the breathing is coming and going in and out, and you no longer have to concentrate. It becomes fixed in the awareness. But that doesn't mean you're not aware of other things. The breathing is still there as a constant coming and going there, but around it you still are able to notice things arising and vanishing. That's where you practice vipassana meditation. As I mentioned earlier in the day, I thought, when the breath is there going on in the background, that helps to keep the level of calmness at a stable rate. But at the same time, you're noticing other things coming and going, the flux of impermanence. So you have both of those connections. That is where the ideal state to practice the vipassana awareness.
Thank you, Bhante.
Actually, the Buddha mentioned two types of meditation. One is called Samadhi Pubangama Vipassana, and the other is called Vipassana Pubangama Samadhi. Now, the meanings of that are, depending on different temperaments, one person may practice one-pointed concentration and gain samadhi, but without getting stuck in the quietness, they then focus that attention onto the flux of impermanence and develop vipassana. But a lot of people see that the calmness is developed from that initial samadhi is so peaceful. They don't want to go in listening to other things. They just want to hang out and groove in that blissful state. And that's the trap. So the other way, so a person can develop the samadhi first, and then using that focused awareness, not getting trapped in that, but using it to then open up and notice the flux of impermanence. Or the other is a person starts the way that I normally recommend people, but I do both together actually, is you start being mindful. You start with the body being mindful, and you are focusing on the breathing, but you don't get totally absorbed in that. But you do it to the extent, at the same time as you're feeling the breathing, you're aware of an itch here, you're aware of something over here, things are coming and going. And so you're developing in them at the same time. And then when that awareness gets fixed, and the breathing, where you no longer have to look for it. Even if you want to not look for it, it's still staying there in your mind. That connection to the breathing. That's the ideal state, where you no longer have to concentrate. It's always there in the back of the attention. Not as a focal point, but it's a constant in the background. And any time you want to, you can just fall onto that. But that will allow you not to get lost in your thoughts. Because it's like a leash for a dog. Okay, you got a wild dog. So what do? You run out and bite the mailman. So you got to put a leash on the dog and tie it to a tree. Then when the mailman comes by, the dog runs out barking, but he gets stopped by the leash. And so he can't actually bite the mailman. He reaches the end of the leash. Then he gets tired and finally he sits down. So in the same way, we use an object to concentrate on, like the breathing. And then our mind runs out, gets distracted by something, but then before it totally gets lost, it remembers the breathing. It gets stopped by that, it reaches the leash of that attention to the breathing. And so it still might wander a bit, but it doesn't wander to the extent of totally getting lost and then, getting confused and all that. You will catch it sooner and sooner, the more you have that attention to the breathing. And so that's what I call about the integration and the balance of mindfulness and concentration. That is the balance of mindfulness and concentration, where they're equally strong. Concentration keeps that state of calmness and the buffer zone there, but not to get sunk into the silence. And the alertness, the mindfulness, is developing the insight into impermanence and no self, the three characteristics. And that is how you have to balance mindfulness and concentration.
So Bhante, at that point, we no longer have to try to put the attention on the focus. That starts to happen automatically. So the attention can be directed toward vipassana.
Yes.
More push broad.
Yes.
Okay.
The reason why we struggle with practicing vipassana because we didn't cultivate that anchor enough. So the mind gets overwhelmed. There's too many things going on, and people's minds get frustrated, or But when you have that connection to the breathing, then that tempers all of that. Then you're not going to get flustered or tired by the barrage of stuff that's coming through the senses, because you've got that groundedness to your object of concentration, which is the breathing. Anyway, I think we've
Yes.
gone over our time, so
Sadhu,
I talk too
sadhu,
much. So.
sadhu. Bhante.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys are new, if you're new to Insight Meditation Community of Richmond, I believe there's stickers, and are there anything else up there?
There are, Bhante, you want to share your verse that we talked about yesterday?
My what?
Your verse that's out on the table on the sticker. The
Mindfulness a day keeps
Yeah.
dukkha away.
yes, there are bumper stickers, window stickers, however you want to use them out there. If you're welcome to take some of those if you like.
Yeah, so please
Bhante
help
would love to
yourself.
see those out there.
Oh, wait a minute, because I had something else also.
Oh,
I brought some more books. I think they're in my other bag.
which is
The Body-Mind Connection. This is a little booklet I wrote that has, in a nutshell, everything I've been talking about today, most of it, a little booklet, including about the M&Ms and about the breathing and integrating the breathing with the yoga, how yoga and the meditation fit together very well. And there's, of course, there's not enough for everybody, but I left some in the temple.
Koji?
Yeah, but there are a couple of. One of them has some yoga poses in it. This one doesn't. But if somebody doesn't have a good memory and can't remember everything I said today, then if you want to get a book or maybe make some copies of it. It's very short, actually. It's just like 3 essays that I wrote over a period of time about based on my own experience with yoga and meditation.
Is that available as an EPUB or PDF online?
It's on my blog, yes. You can download it from my blog. Yeah, if anybody's interested, I have a blog that I started about 10 years ago. A lot of it is about my travels and trekking in the Himalayas and stuff, but also I have links to 4 books that I wrote about meditation and my life story, autobiography, and links to many, many Dhamma talks in videos about on talks that I've given about yoga and meditation and so on. And then those 4 books can be downloaded as well.
So the last thing that I'd like to share with you all today is that most Buddhist teachers will actually not charge for their time. They'll simply give their teachings and their time, and people are free to give what they can or would like to give. So the cost of your registration today did cover the cost of the snacks and the space, but if you'd like to make a contribution today to Bhante Rahula's center, the Lion of Wisdom Meditation Center in Maryland, there's a basket it's labeled Dhamma, and so any donations that you give today, if you found today helpful or restful or any sort of positive, we encourage you to make a contribution out there. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found it helpful. Thank you.
Oh, and just one other thing. Also, we have a website of our meditation centers just outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. It's near Gaithersburg or Rockville, Germantown, Maryland. And it's a big house, and we've made a meditation center out of it. We can accommodate about 20 people overnight. And we're starting to have, we just started this last year, and we're having some weekend retreats. Mainly it's kind of will be for weekend type of retreats, not really long retreats. But so we're having, until the end of the year, we're having this Labor Day weekend retreat on these long weekends, and Veterans Day holiday weekend retreat, and the year-end retreat from December 28th to January 1st. So, I know it's not, it's kind of about 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive up there, but anyway, so you can take a look at the website if you're interested in the schedule. And it's lionwisdom.org. And that is the website, quite simple, just lionwisdom.org. And then you'll come to the web page, and it'll say our current program, what we're having, our current program. You scroll down and read the description of the different programs there too.
Thank you so much, Bhante. Thank you.
You're welcome. And don't forget, mindfulness a day keeps dukkha away.
lionwisdom.org. And may I have one of the books?